Welcome to Strength Chat Podcast, presented by Kabuki Strength. Introducing your hosts, Chris Duffin, the mad scientist of strength, Rudy Cadlow, mature athlete and coach, and the wizard of training himself, Brandon Sen.
3, 2, 1. Welcome to Strength Chat with your host, the mad scientist of strength. Yes, myself, Chris Duffin. To my right, he has made it back. Our
Where'd I
doctor.
go?
I don't know. You were missing from like the last one, weren't you?
Yeah, I was remote.
Remote. Always on vacation.
Absent.
That's right. Must be nice.
I need longer breaks than you.
Is that part of being a mature athlete? And
That is. It's
okay.
Recovery time.
I need to practice that. I just
Is that what qualifies you as a mature athlete? Because I might qualify for that.
Needing more recovery time? You're just weak and get
No,
hurt.
I train
you
so
get
hard.
hurt too much.
Train so hard, so efficient that my tissues just can't handle it.
I just take mini breaks all day long.
Frequent
every day.
mini breaks.
Yes, that's right. So,
That's what we call the naps
Dr.
on the-
Rudolph.
Hey, are you going to introduce me?
Dr.
Oh, okay,
Rudolph.
you're not
Oh,
moving around.
Well, we're not
Yes,
done with Dr.
no,
Rudolph
no.
yet.
I thought you were moving on.
To my left.
I get no respect.
To my left. I think he's a new employee. I was looking at our recent team photo, and I was doing a head count, and I'm like, Rudy, we've hired somebody. Did you know we hired somebody?
We have one more.
Payroll has gone up. I don't know if he's cashing 2 checks or what's going on, but there appears to be 2 Brandons. It took me a while to figure it out. 2 Brandons in our most recent team photo. The wizard of training is now the double wizard of training.
Yeah. Well, I guess I can chime in on that. There was a picture that surfaced anonymously on the Kabuki Strength Instagram page last Christmas. I think it was Christmas. It was a pretty awful Christmas.
Team No Calves.
It was heavily photoshopped if you look closely.
Team No Calves.
If you get out your magnifying glass and look.
You would need a magnifying glass.
I know that.
To see the size of those calves.
It was photoshopped. Also,
I don't think.
there's many other photoshops in there. Let's see if everyone can find them.
Brandon,
Well, we updated our picture recently, a couple weeks ago. I decided to just be present but not in the photo.
you were playing Where's Waldo?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think your forehead.
So my eyes got in the photo because I was standing behind Jesse.
But you were really trying to hide your calves, we know.
However, the master of illusion put me back in there. So now I am in that picture twice. I'm surprised more people didn't see that.
But didn't remove the old one. Just the
I know, that's
Brandon
actually
peeping in.
really funny.
Showing your best
No,
features. Your
people-
best features. They can see. They
yeah.
can see your receding hairline. And
Well, it's not really receding. It's just kind of gone. There's
no recession here.
no. Well, which is very unfortunate. They make products for that, but I don't think they work. Anyway, I did my best to get out of it, and I got put back in. And I'm actually really surprised.
There is no escape. There is no escape.
I'm really surprised that more people didn't see that or care. They're just like, oh, this is normal. There's someone standing back there. That's okay. No one said anything. That's good.
Well, welcome to the team.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome to the team.
Whoever you are.
My first and last day.
Yep. So today on Strength Chat, we've got head strength and conditioning coach from Georgia Tech for Olympic sports, Jacob.
Georgia State.
Ah,
Yeah, that's where I played.
Start over.
Yeah.
Let's start over.
we got to start all the way from back to the beginning,
Who are those guys?
I don't know.
and then I'll probably screw up your name too. Then that's
That's
guaranteed.
all right.
Lonowski.
Jacob Lonowski. That's
I
easy.
got it. Okay,
That's
Jacob
good.
Lonowski. Yep.
Bring me back to telemarketer days.
Georgia State.
So, welcome to the program, Jacob.
Thank you. It's
So-
a pleasure to be.
Yeah, we've actually spoken with Jacob several times. Usually at a convention with Jacob coming up and doing his best to get as much free body tempering from the team as possible, basically. So,
100%.
We've got you pegged, Jacob.
He's a gigantic individual. It takes more time to work through it.
He's the reason we came up with the pain pill, I think.
So sitting behind the booth getting worked on by the team while we're up chatting away. So we've talked to Jacob a few times in the last couple of years, I think. So we thought we'd have you on the show because some of the conversations have been very productive, and thought they would be worthwhile kind of diving into some of those territory again and sharing those thoughts and discussions with our listeners. So.
Yeah. I might add that Jacob co-authored an article with us on the benefits of the Duffalo bar for bench pressing, particularly for offensive and defensive linemen. So getting that additional training effect. So thanks again for your assistance on that, Jacob.
Absolutely. It was a lot of fun.
And you're using the Duffalo bar, right?
We currently don't have any Duffalo bars right now. But
we can take care of that today, man.
It's actually not a Skype call. This is a sales call. So it's all been
excellent technique.
It's like one of those timeshare things. We're going to talk to him for an hour and then not let him leave.
Yeah.
Right.
It's our new sales program, actually. So
Can't end the call until you buy at least 3 new bars.
Stick around for 2 hours, you get a free lunch.
Fantastic. Sounds like
So I first met Jacob at the CSCCA where Brady was working on him, and we got into some discussions about the collegiate setting versus the private sector in regards to strength and conditioning, scope of practice, where some maybe one side of that coin is better than the other, or maybe has advantage in some areas versus the other. And that's, I think, what we're going to dive into today. So, Jacob, as we get started here, why don't you give we mentioned you were the head strength and conditioning coach of the Olympic sports at Georgia State, now working with soccer and volleyball, I believe. And
yes.
Why don't you give our listeners a little bit of background of your strength and conditioning career as a professional?
Okay, yeah. Just to give a little context, I grew up in Nebraska, and I got recruited to play football and ended up deciding to play at Georgia Tech. Graduated from there in 2008, went into the business world, decided it wasn't the right environment for me. Just not enough people cared about what was going on in the circle I was in. So I got back into the last place people were invested, and that was with athletics. So I had the opportunity to take a graduate assistant position at Georgia State and get my master's in exercise science. And since 2011, I've been at Georgia State working as a strength and conditioning professional in some capacity, from graduate assistant to now in charge of men's and women's soccer and court and beach volleyball. So that is the rundown.
Very good.
So Georgia Tech, that's where we got the Georgia Tech.
Yeah, that's where I played and got.
You're a rambling wreck. Okay.
That is correct.
All right.
So, as a professional strength and conditioning coach, where do you see? You don't have to go immediately into comparisons of the private sector, but what benefits do you see? So, for our listeners, we're talking right now within the role as a professional. So, if you want to become a coach within the collegiate setting or the private sector, what benefits you might have, what scope of practice, so on and so forth. So where do you think the collegiate setting really thrives over the private sector? Is there benefits to being a strength and conditioning professional within the collegiate setting? If so, what are they?
I think that when done right, I don't know if there's a better environment for human performance development. If everyone's on the same page and everyone wants what's best for the athletes and is willing to do what is necessary for their developing them to their maximum, I don't know if there's a better environment to be a part of.
Because everyone's geared towards that. You got funding, and
if the money's there and the expertise is there, you just have everyone honed in their with their expertise, and it's just really hard to beat. It's really hard to beat when everyone's on the same page. Yeah. Yeah,
I think especially once you have a big enough team, everyone's doing their specific jobs, It's
Yes.
not one guy running a gym somewhere who has to fill a lot of different roles. You have one guy that does this. You might dabble in some other areas, but I mean, is that true? I've never worked in the collegiate setting. Don't let me misspeak, but
so what can happen at your larger institutions? You can absolutely have every single person that's in charge of every department have 15, 20, 25 years of experience, and have people under them that also have over a decade of experience. So you just can't beat a department that has hundreds of years of experience in their profession. It's just hard to beat that. But what ends up happening is in smaller institutions, you end up getting a lot of turnover, and those that perform really well end up making their way to bigger places. So you get this environment that creates that the people that stay aren't those that are pushing their limits. Right. So you kind of get the people that want to be movers and shakers and contribute leave, and those that aren't willing to rock the boat stay. And so it kind of can get into a toxic toxic setting.
What do you think that is?
I think a lot of it has to do with some places that have athletics shouldn't. And if you can't invest into doing athletics right, you shouldn't just have athletics because.
Right. That kind of reflects sort of the reverse pyramid we have, though, in sports in America. I mean, maybe some of the motivation for advancement is recognition and money for strength coaches. But we hear so much from strength coaches at the higher levels, pro and college, that they're receiving athletes from high school, and high school athletes or high school coaches receiving high school athletes from junior sports. That kids are broken, that they're not being coached well enough in strength and conditioning, at the start. And so, if it was all druthers, we'd have equal amount of expertise across the board, but that's not the way it works. So what's your vision for correcting that long term?
First, understanding that there are just basic levels of development that you need to hit before it even makes sense to start specializing in sport. If you can't hit just fundamental milestones, like if you can't do 10 push-ups, I don't care what sex you are, if you can't do 10 clean, good push-ups, why are you trying to throw 85 miles an hour fastball? Like, I don't get it. Or if we can't do a nice controlled squatting pattern with any kind of implement, like why are you going to jump on hard wood hundreds of times during a practice session? So there are just developmental milestones that aren't really achieved, and that compounded with favoring and incentivizing skill development over just human development, you end up in this place where we have these archetypal injury patterns from sport to sport to sport because they're not physically developed, and they're being developed in sports-related environments that just overtrain certain patterns relative to the rest of their development.
That I might be going off on a tangent here, but there was a point in time that there were standard physical education standards throughout whether you're an athlete or not. Throughout our educational curriculum, and that's been stripped away as well as a lot of basic physical education programs. Have been pulled away, and like I said, you've got to have some sort of national level approach to standards there. Now we do it across the board with checking the boxes for doing your multiple choice tests and stuff like that. But
sure,
like we've lost that as a whole, and you can kind of see it in society, not just athletics.
Oh yeah.
Do they still have that in high school? No. The physical standards tests?
No.
That's
been gone.
I graduated in 2008, and we had when I was there. So you had to run a certain mile time and do X amount of.
It was an outlier. That was a school standard, not a.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that reached the height post World War II, and in the 50s and 60s, and the whole, Sputnik deal when Russia was, trying to beat us in the space race, and our country rallied around that, and there were incentives for schools. In fact, it was a federal mandate that schools have physical education and measurable achievements. And over the years, as the world has become, quote, a more peaceful place, I guess, we've dropped that off. As budgets got tighter, the first thing that always seems to go is physical education. Then the second thing is sports.
Well, I think why physical education would be cut first is because it's the benefits and consequences are not seen until well after the damage or work has been done. So you're talking about no consequences are seen until 10, 15, 20 years down the road.
Yeah, that's what I say. 20 years, you start getting, cardiovascular issues, diabetes,
Postural,
all this.
Yeah.
Back problems. That all starts showing up like 20 years later. Yeah.
Yeah, and to bring it back to the collegiate environment, so the athletes that are coming in, if they're true freshmen, are 18, and if they're transfers, they could be anywhere to 22, 23. So that it's just starting to be the time that they're going to begin to express the dysfunctions they've been developing their entire youth. So they're 18, they've been training in their sport since 8, 9, 10, and they're just starting to express all of the damage that they've done from like a movement quality and developmental standpoint.
Yeah, and you kind of alluded to it just a little bit earlier, like you're going to take that bad pattern and do it over and over and over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And that's really like the people that are into sports, let's say the families and stuff, like it seems to be very much like a common practice these days to specialize early and stay with it, which, anybody in the industry knows that that's a bad approach. But as a culture, that's what we see.
I think that's what we end up valuing, because what we end up doing as a whole is what we value. And so we value acute development over chronic development, even if it costs us our chronic ceiling to be lower. So we just end up investing in it and expressing acutely as opposed to how high can we go if we take it slow.
Yep.
Yeah, everybody wants to get there sooner than later.
Yeah. And it really undercuts the opportunities of the athletes in the long run.
So in your setting, you're working with larger groups of individuals. You're not in the one-on-one coaching environment. So when you have, one of these athletes who comes to you who is just their maybe skill development within their specific sports really high. They can throw hard.
Yeah.
They can jump high. They have all of the things that maybe have been tested for, they can do well, but they just move horribly, and you can see the faulty patterns and all that. Within that bigger group setting, what do you do with those individuals when they come in? Is it a situation where, we think about, like, one thing that's been popular within powerlifting within the last 1 to 2 years is like Bulgarian style training or maxing out every day. And,
Sure.
if you hear about Ivan, not going to try and pronounce his last name, but the Bulgarian coach.
That guy.
Yeah, there you go. He would, he'd basically say, well, you either like survive the system or you just die doing it. So what do you do with those individuals who come to you who are moving poorly? Their ceiling is low. Do they either make it or they don't? Is there any way that you can help them in that setting?
So in order to answer that question, I'm going to break it down into multiple pieces. First, like the Bulgarian-style systems, they exist everywhere. They're not so much developmental models as they are selection models. So they're just seeing who survives, who makes it, and whomever makes it are going to be the people that compete for us. They're not necessarily optimized for developing the most athletes to the highest degree. They find that 1% that can do it, and then they just are good because they made it. And So at bigger institutions, you can have more selection-based models because you're getting higher quality athletes running through there every year. If you break down a 4 or 5 star, there are 3, 4 other folks equally as capable right behind them. Whereas you get to smaller institutions, you have to prioritize development. Otherwise, you never have a chance.
It makes a lot of sense.
I really like that terminology.
Yeah, it's developmental versus selection-based models.
Yeah, and a lot of coaches get obsessed with expression-based measurements. How high can you jump? How fast are you running? How heavy can you lift?
Right. How much can you bench?
Yeah, like how much you bench. Versus being concerned with how much progress can we make with this athlete in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And that's just a mentality shift for being in an environment that cannot afford to have 10, 15, 20% turnover within your teams. You can't afford it. You lose 3, 4 people, they need to be on the court today. We can't have them express maximally every day.
Yeah. Well, it seems like it would even be to the institution or to the team's benefit to keep players healthy instead of pushing beyond these capacities that the individuals have. That's got to be way more expensive for them to take someone through the rehabilitation process than to just keep them healthy in the first place. Now, that doesn't mean that you undertrain them, but I think you have to have like a lens, right?
Well, and that's where the more that development matters in individual athletes, the more you have to have a dialogue with them. You have to get them to communicate how they're feeling, where they're at, and stress them accordingly. Because ideally, you want to continue to increase stress over time so that you elicit greater adaptations. Sure. But if those stresses lead to injury and unnecessarily increase risk, then what are you even doing? Are you just trying to prove a point?
Let me ask you this. We typically form this discussion around professionals, and we say, okay, why did that high school weight room PE teacher coach mess up this kid's squat pattern and have him max out every day? But at what point does it become the athlete's responsibility to move properly? Should we place more emphasis on individual development and put more of the responsibility on the person than the actual professional?
I agree that every athlete ultimately is responsible for their development and their outcomes. However, when you're talking about bringing in 17, 18, 19-year-olds, and you are supposed to be the authority and the adult in the situation, I'm going to put the responsibility on myself to show them the way. And if I'm expecting an 18-year-old to have all the answers for their life, I'm going to fail. They are going to fail.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. I have 5 kids. I can guarantee you I would have never let any of them, when they're at 16 or 17, make a life decision.
Are you referring to myself, Andre, Brady, and Chris?
You guys are all
one more.
You guys are all my children too. But you're right. Yeah, you can't expect a 16, 17, 18-year-old. I mean, even up to college age kids to be making the appropriate decisions because they're so influenced by the environment and those same questions you just talk about. How high can you jump? How much can you bench? How fast can you run the 40? So they push in for that selective position. Just talking about that too. Do you feel like the NCAA is sort of a little bit to blame here? I mean, I don't want to get you fined. I guess they can't fine you for talking to us on a podcast. But I mean, you look at basketball, for example, which is the worst. I mean, there's all that the NCAA allows the one and done now. So, I mean, if you're a basketball coach, in the ACC or the Big East or the SEC or any of the big conferences, and you're trying to recruit a 5-star athlete, he wants to know that he's going to play right away as a freshman because he wants to go to the next level in 9 months. Yeah.
Well, and I think that it really comes down to the type of program that you want to run and be a part of as a coach. Do you value winning more than you value the long-term and sustainable development of the people that you bring on? And if so, go ahead, bring in your one and dones, win your games, and have your relative acute success. But if you're talking about building a dynasty and being a part of a legacy, then you have to have a little bit more of a long-term approach. So it also depends on what kind of incentives you're getting from your administration. If they want wins over everything else, on a long enough timeline as a coach, if you buy into that, it's your fault that the program's the way that it is. If you want to be a part of a different program, go to a different school.
Well, you're not going to make it at certain schools if that's not your goal. I mean, the wins drives money. The money builds new stadiums. New stadiums get filled up. That builds new engineering schools, new business schools, new med schools. So, yeah,
that's the rhetoric.
You better win, or you're gone. So that's the conundrum that we have.
And I would say that in the short term, yes, that's probably more true than it is false. But in the long term, if you created such an environment that every single one of the athletes that came through your doors were so touched by the world that you created for them that they came back and donated and created an alumni program that was second to none, I bet in the long term that would yield you potentially more returns than just being very focused on the acute.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough. It's a back and forth, right?
Sure.
And there's probably no like clear line, like, oh, this is the sweet spot. You know, it's you probably have to be surrounded by just as like-minded professionals. I find it hard to believe a young aspiring strength coach gets into a more elite position and then he has to convince everybody around him versus stepping into a position where it's kind of already established culture.
And that's the hardest part, is creating a culture or changing a pre-existing one. Yeah. That's the hardest part. Once the environment's set, it's easy. You've already built the ship, and it's already moving in the direction. You just got to keep it going on its current heading. All the hard work's done.
It's different from sport to sport, though, in the collegiate setting. I mean, basketball, I think, is the worst because you can go after 1 year, but the NCAA has similar rules for, I think, baseball and football. You have to stay at least 3 years. Is that before you can go to the pros?
You don't have to play football or baseball. You just have to be a certain age with football, and I think you can get picked up at any time.
It's 3 years after your high school graduation or something. Yeah. But
and just one last thing before we move on is, as a coach, if you bring on the type of people that want to be one and done, and that's fine. And even if you bring in one and done talent, if you can build such an environment that they want to be a part of it, even though they can go make money, then you've got something special. It's like, what are you investing in? What are you incentivizing? Do people want to be a part of it?
You mentioned really early on today about the people who stay there for a long time. I'll kind of paraphrase. They kind of get comfortable maybe versus the people who want to rock the boat. Do you consider this kind of mentality for this long-term development somewhat rocking the boat? Because I can imagine it leaves a lot of uncomfortableness within individuals, maybe who are higher up, who see that immediate return on success.
Well, absolutely. And if you are going to do something great, it's always going to carry a risk. Always. If you want to be comfortable, I would not recommend competing in anything. Yep. Because if you stay comfortable, you will not be competitive. So I always think that kind of narrative is interesting, that as administrators and managers, like, we want to be predictable and we want to be comfortable with outcomes. However, we ask the athletes to be uncomfortable and do the impossible every day. So it's just a curious kind of paradox in that kind of thinking. Like, if you really want to be a part of a successful program, either you put it all on the line for a chance or you don't.
Yeah, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. You kind of got to go for it.
Yeah, and the way I like to think about it is the only way to get there is to leap. There's no in between. You either jump and you make it, or you do nothing and don't. Like, the only way is to leap.
Yeah, kind of in that same vein, we have a decent amount of strength and conditioning coaches at the collegiate level on, and oftentimes we'll hear frustration from them because they don't have as much control over their specific sport or maybe their specific areas they feel they should. An example might be strength and conditioning coach wants to do this as, their program or their model. Football coach comes in and says, well, this is how we've done it that's been successful. No, do this style of training. Is that something that's common maybe for you or that you know of within the industry? And if so, what is something that you would like to have more control over as a strength and conditioning coach at the collegiate side?
I would say that the more eyes you have on anything, and if you communicate, the better. So there may be something that I really want to do, but on receiving new information and reconsidering, I'll change. However, more often than not, what ends up happening is that a sport coach will essentially dictate what they want. And that I think needs to be the thing that changes. For most teams, it needs to be a conversation and a dialogue that everyone can get on board with. Because if one person is dictating everything all the time, then why do you even have me here? Like, why don't you just do it?
So I'm going to jump in here, Jacob, because in these conversations with you and other people in the same situation, I've heard that same consistent theme of the people that have been successful. So not the people that just complain, but the ones that have broken through. And it has been around that communication piece that, hey, maybe I started doing, I jumped in and I did what that, dictating coach wanted me to do, built a rapport and showed them that, via conversations, whatever, I'm intelligent, I know what I'm doing. And then, came in with making a presentation, whatever, give me a shot at this, but it's this open rapport instead of just being like, oh my God, they're telling me what I need to do. And I'm going to tell a quick story here. There was a number of years ago, I was brought in by an investment firm to help turn around a company that they had invested in, and I started working there. And they brought in two of us individuals, and the owner of the company, when the investment firm was gone for the week, came in and he got the two of us in his office, and he just outlaid this completely wild plan that would be harmful for the company, the employees, and everything. And he's like, "This is what I need you guys to do. You're going to do it." And he walked out of the room, and the other person that was with me in the room, the two of us that were hired to do this, he looks at me. He's like, "Oh my God, that's absolutely crazy." And I'm like, "Yep, it is." And he's like, "But I guess we got to do it." And I'm like, "Well, if you feel that you need to, but I'm not going to. This is what I believe in, and this is what I'm going to do." And, anyway, I ended up going to the board of the investment company, or the board of the company, which was most of it was seated by people on the investment firm, and they ejected the owner off of the company. And I did what I needed to do. I turned around the company over the course of a number of years, and ended up getting it sold. During the course of that time, the other individual that was in the room with me didn't make it because he wasn't able to, stand behind what he believed in and communicate it appropriately and just made it happen. And I guess it's really easy to go, I'm just going to follow because there's this person here telling me. They're in this role. They're in this whatever. But, it doesn't mean, just being an ass and being, do it appropriately and communicate the way that you need to. Present your plan. But stand behind what you believe in. Make concessions, where you need to. But that's what you need to do to drive change.
Yeah, and a couple points I want to play off from your story is that just because you're in charge doesn't mean you're a leader, and that's something that I have to learn and relearn time and time again based upon the teams and the people that I work with. Like, how can I be a leader given this situation, given this specific environment? And because I just don't want to be the person that's demanding compliance. It's like, how can I grow ownership? And I think that those are very different things. And I think that a lot of coaches get those confused. Like, just because you have a team that's complying doesn't mean that they are going to be able to get the job done when it's on them.
This is never lead from title or position, right?
Yeah.
So just because you can, never try to use that. Like, you need to do what I'm doing because I'm the boss. I am this. Like, if you have to do that, you have failed.
You've already lost.
Yeah.
You've already lost if you're using your position as leverage to get people to comply. It's already over. It's already over.
100%. Yep.
So what happens on the other side of it? We talked a lot about the collegiate setting. What do you think about, I don't know if you've had a ton of experience personally working in the private sector, but even just from your observation, what do you think some of the benefits are there? We talked about the collegiate side being like, once everyone's on board, you have your job, I have my job, we have an entire team doing these things that have been around forever.
Yes.
And that can be the ultimate situation if everybody's a well-oiled machine, you know. So what about the private sector? So the one-on-one setting, the small groups. Do you see any benefit to, as a professional coming into the field or being in the field, do you see any benefit to working on that side of it?
I do. I think they're very different because so I'll start with some of the negatives in the private, more one-on-one setting. Every new client you get, you have to convince them. You have to sell them again and in a new way. And I think that in contrast to the collegiate professional setting, you have a culture that has its momentum already moving, and they just fall in place. Like, whereas you work one-on-one with a person, it's selling a brand new client that you know what you're talking about and convincing them on their terms and in their language that you can help them. So doing that, if I had to do that with every single athlete that I've ever worked with, I would be exhausted constantly. But in the one-on-one setting, like, that's the nature of the beast. You've got people that don't know who you are, don't know what you know, don't know how you can help them. So it's kind of it's just a part of the more private the private leaning area is you just have to resell everyone. But that being said, is that for better or for worse, you don't have the oversight from all the other departments, from all the other eyes. You can kind of move in a way that best suits the client. And to kind of go back to a question that you asked earlier, Brandon, like, what do you do with the dysfunctional mover that's really skilled when you have 20, 25 people in the room? Well, if I have them one-on-one, I can properly address it. If I don't, I have to kind of simplify the movement of everyone and modulate intensities and loads for people who are more skilled. So that's an easy way around that. But back to the private setting, you can move at such a pace and implement things that may be a little bit more experimental and maybe a little bit more outside of your scope, but they can work on a client-to-client basis and more anecdotally, which you get into the collegiate or professional environment. And if you lay hands on folks, you could potentially be held accountable for that if it's outside your scope of practice, which, again, is for better and for worse.
Yeah, so he's talking about laying hands on people, specifically maybe using our products as an example, using a boomstick on an individual at the collegiate setting might not be the best idea for a strength and conditioning coach. Private setting, maybe a little bit more freedom.
Yes.
Obviously there's scope of practices, and we would never suggest that Joe Schmo, strength and conditioning coach, is diagnosing injuries and soft tissue ailments and trying to smash the tissues to heal it, But, definitely you might be able to do some of the things that interest you more, So
yes.
if one of these things interests you and you think that it has application to positively benefit the person in front of you, you might have the freedom to chase that. Whether it works or not is time will tell. Maybe in the collegiate side you don't have that freedom, but you have all of these other things backing you that maybe outweigh that. So
yes,
it might not even be a situation of which of these two areas best suits the strength and conditioning coach as a coach, which one equips them the best to, because really we're talking about how can we maximize the physical capabilities of the individual in front of us. Maybe there's not a benefit or, one is higher than the other. It could be just be a situation of entrepreneurship. Do you want to actually run your own business? Do you want to invest your time in all the areas it takes to do that? As business owners, you guys, what do you guys think about that?
What do we think about? Say it again.
Yeah. So, do you feel, as being in the side of strength and conditioning, on the owning a business that's within that realm, do you think you got into this more because you were absolutely interested in physically developing somebody, or was it more the business side of things? Opening your own business, the glamour of that. What do you think?
Our statement, like right at the bottom of every one of my emails, it says "Live better through strength," and it's the ability to have that impact on the world by teaching them how to do that. That's why we're here. I mean, I gave you the business story earlier. I mean, I had plenty opportunities to express on that other end, and I didn't feel like I was doing what I was meant to do.
And I think that key word is teaching and education, and the position you're in, and at the collegiate level, you guys you're surrounded with other physical educators, if you will. You also have access to, in some cases, departments of biomechanics and physiology, and
Yes.
Studies that are taking place. So you guys are immersed in education, and therefore you ostensibly are learning all along as well. On the private side, if we pull that conversation back again, a client comes in to see, wants to hire you. I mean, you have to assume he's looking to you for some expertise. But does that particular client have the same amount of expertise today as he might have had 5 years earlier, with all the information that's out there in the world about strength and conditioning and training and physical fitness? The clients are a little bit smarter too. So as a personal trainer, where do you go in the private setting that you guys have the opportunity on in the collegiate setting? Where do you go to be smarter each year, and 5 years smarter and 5 years better educated in the profession today? Where do you go? Where do you seek that?
Okay, I'll start with answering the private question. I think that the general populace has access to more information than they ever have, but I don't know if their ability to apply it has improved. So we've had more knowledge, but we have less context. And I don't think that that's unique to just strength and conditioning and human performance. So it's a matter of being able to communicate with clients in such a way that's like, yes, these data points, but this is how it all fits together, and this is why you should do this specific program. So that I think that is just a different obstacle that hasn't had to be overcome in the past, because they're more informed than ever before, but they have no idea how it all fits. And now to how do you educate the educator? What I've done is we've actually worked together with some of the PhD candidates with our kinesiology and health department, and did a neat study last fall with our softball team and our beach volleyball team in regards to using different post-workout nutrition and its effect on measurable outcomes. So we did a 3-rep bench press max, a 5-rep squat max, vertical jump, and 5-10-5. So we did, after 3 weeks of just kind of GPP, we did a test, and then after 10 weeks of the rest of the semester, we tested all the other stuff again. And one group had chocolate milk, and the other group had Fairlife. So that's one thing that we've done. and working together with the K&H department in starting their strength and conditioning coursework. I've worked with his name is Pete Roletter, and they hired him on to start a strength and conditioning track on like a 5-year kind of program. And we've worked closely together about creating that curriculum, and I guest lecture in that course as well. And we've got a physical therapy school on campus just right across the street, and I try to coax some of those students to come over and spend a little time with us in the weight room so that they can get a more applied perspective on what they're learning in class. And we've had some pretty good results in getting those students in to kind of adding an additional skill set to not just having an exclusively clinical perspective.
So, okay, you can't leave me hanging here since I spend the extra money for Fairlife. Is my money being well spent, or should I just go to Nabisco's chocolate milk?
Well, within the context of the study, there was no difference on outcomes that we measured. And so if you're talking about if they're all at a fairly isocaloric state, then it doesn't matter as much. But if you're talking about if we would have measured and compared body fat percentages, I'm sure there may be a little bit of difference, but that wasn't a part of that study. So that's something for some more research to be done.
Well, I'll start researching. I'll just buy Fairlife chocolate milk.
Yeah,
I got a cup.
It's good stuff.
Rudy gets shredded over the course of the next year drinking.
Yeah.
Wait till you see me next time.
Jacob, we need to talk.
I expect
we have new information. So we're kind of running up on about where we on our time limit here, but anytime we have professionals on, we like to pick their brain on tips or advice that they might have for younger professionals coming into the field. So if you have someone who's in the process of getting their degree or maybe interested in the field of collegiate strength and conditioning, are there any specific tips that you have for those individuals?
The hours are long. Expect to work long hours, but don't let that deter you, because it's a very unique setting that can allow you to have you can have tremendous impact positively and negatively. And the more that you know and the better you apply it, it can shift more positive. But the amount of power that you can have in shaping young people's lives is tremendous. Like, not just from a physical standpoint, but in just a behavior and life outcome standpoint. And if you want to be a part of that, yeah, I think overall it's worth it at this point in my life, because you have an opportunity to have hundreds of people walk through your door under your care, and that at the end of a few years when they start leaving, if they're worse, just because of you. And if they're better, you played a part in that. And if you're willing to take that risk, yeah, you get in it. And also be willing to be wrong a lot. Just be willing to visit different schools, high school, college, professional, and see how they do it. Because success is situational. And if you're not willing to see how people do things in different places and take some pieces and see how it can work for you, you're not going to grow, and you're not going to help the people you work with to the greatest level that you can.
That's great advice.
All right. Well, where can people find you if they're looking to reach out to you, if that's something that you're open to?
Yeah, absolutely. You can reach out to me at jlonowski@gsu.edu right now. If that's too much for you, you can just kind of peruse around on Georgia State University's website and find me there, and just send me an email. We can start talking.
Okay.
All right.
Jacob, thanks so much, man. We look forward to seeing you again and hopefully collaborating on some more stuff in the future.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, guys.